So there's a former nuclear bunker in Switzerland that's being quietly filled with gold. I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of ounces. Now, at first, I assumed it was a central bank behind this because who else buys gold at that scale? But it turns out it's a private company. But not just any company, one whose entire business depends on people trusting the US dollar, which is strange enough, but it gets stranger. This company is also one of the largest US Treasury debt holders on Earth, larger than Germany, Israel, or Saudi Arabia, which means they are simultaneously buying the asset that backs the dollar and the asset that people run to when confidence in currencies collapse. Which is when I realized the question isn't why are they buying so much gold, it's what do they know about what's coming next that we don't. The company is called Tether, and despite being virtually unknown to most Americans, it has quickly become the most important dollar business in the world, with more than 120 million people in over 160 countries using it to save, spend, and in some cases even escape the collapse of their own currencies. Now, every digital dollar that Tether issues is backed by a reserve, the majority of those reserves being US Treasuries, which is how Tether has become the 17th largest holder of US government debt in the world, which is also why what Tether is doing with their profits is worth paying attention to. So last year, something in Washington changed that connects all of this. The Genius Act was signed into law. Now, most of the news coverage focused on how this impacted crypto, but US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said something that stood out to me. He described stablecoins, which Tether is a type of, as the future for demand of US debt. See, under the Genius Act, any stablecoin that's issued for a digital dollar had to be backed by US Treasuries or Treasury-like assets, meaning every time Tether issues a dollar stablecoin, there is an equal demand for US debt being created. But this isn't just some small potato story. It's a big deal. Right now, the stablecoin market is worth roughly $300 billion. And forecasts predict that by the end of the decade, it could be worth $2 to $4 trillion. See, for decades, the US has relied on foreign governments and central banks to be the largest buyers of US debt, but then something changed. US Treasuries have been selling off, and instead, these central banks have been moving into physical gold at a time when the US needs buyers more than ever. See, the US isn't just borrowing money anymore. It's borrowing money to pay the interest on money it's already borrowed. And to keep up with that, that's where you need constant buyers. But as these buyers leave, analysts have been asking, who is going to buy the debt? Which is where stablecoins have become a lifeline for the future of the dollar, and at the center of it all is Tether. Okay, so here's the math. Tether holds roughly $125 billion, give or take, of US Treasuries right now. That's all debt that the US has to pay interest on. Interest that is pure profit in Tether's pocket. Now, at current rates, we could be looking at upwards of $13 billion a year that Tether's getting just from the interest on the debt it holds. But where is all of that profit going? Into gold. We're talking about physical gold bars, not ETFs, not some kind of futures contract, but the real deal, bought and paid for and shipped to a nuclear bunker in Switzerland that their very own CEO has described as a, quote, James Bond kind of place. Which makes sense because they hold over 150 tons of physical gold, which puts them in the top 30 gold holders in the entire world, more than the central banks of Australia or the UAE. Now, to be fair, Tether does have their own gold-backed digital token, meaning a digital token backed by physical gold. And some would argue that all these gold purchases are being done just to support that arm of the business. But the more I researched this, the harder it became to dismiss as just supporting their token. Because Tether is not just buying physical gold, they're investing in gold infrastructure, gold distribution, and it's not just the amount that they own, but the speed at which they're acquiring it. In 2025 alone, Tether bought more gold than any other nation on Earth besides Poland. Think about that, a company whose sole existence is reliant on the dollar's success, the dollar's buy-in confidence in the dollar, and is closely tied to those in positions of power here in the US is buying more gold than the entire sovereign world. Why? Before I share my thoughts, tell me your theories in the comments below. I want to hear from you. Now, when questioned about this, their CEO answered that their gold strategy exists not to support their gold token, but a direct quote, to remove ambiguity at a time when confidence in the monetary system is weakening. The person running the world's largest dollar operation, the supposed lifeline and future of the dollar, just came out and said that the monetary system is weakening, a system where the dollar is the foundation of it. So what does Tether know? What do the people specifically closest to the system know about what's coming next that the rest of us don't? Well, the more I started to dig into Tether and who is connected to it, I quickly realized that those who were managing the reserves, writing the rules, and running the US expansion were all deeply tied to our current political and financial system. Tether's reserves, they aren't managed by some obscure financial organization, they're managed by Cantor Fitzgerald, one of the primary brokers that sits close to the US Treasury and one of the few institutions that's authorized to trade directly with the Federal Reserve itself. Now, Howard Lutnick was the head of Cantor Fitzgerald, but he left to become the US Secretary of Commerce, which is a role that oversees everything from business and trade to technology to national security, leaving Fitzgerald behind to be run by his two sons. Then you have Bo Hines, who helped shape the Genius Act, the very act that's supposed to save the dollar, from inside the White House, now is running Tether's US operations. The people building the rules, managing the operations, they are increasingly overlapping. And whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing isn't really the point I'm trying to make. The point is that these people who are making these decisions at Tether, they aren't outsiders. In fact, they are insiders who have a very specific view of the dollar system, the debt crisis, and what the bigger plan could be. Which brings us back to the question we started with. Why is Tether buying so much gold? Because this ultimately isn't a story about Tether. It's a story about your retirement account, your savings account, your annuity, your pension, everything that lives inside of the dollar-denominated system. If every dollar-denominated asset ultimately sits on top of the US Treasury market, and the company at the center who's responsible for saving the US Treasury market is taking every dollar they earn and investing it into physical gold, what does that tell you about what they could be planning next? Last year, I reported on a US devaluation scheme where Russia blew the whistle on the US following the passing of the Genius Act. Vladimir Putin's senior advisor, Anton Kobiakov, came out and said that the US was planning to push stablecoin adoption onto the rest of the world, and once they had global buy-in, would turn around and devalue it.
America is trying to change the rules in the gold and cryptocurrency markets. Remember how much debt they have, $35 trillion, driving everyone where? Into the cryptocurrency cloud. Right now they have a $35 trillion currency debt. They move it into crypto, into the cloud, devalue it, and start from scratch.
Once enough of the US debt was pushed out into stablecoins, that's when the US could do a global rug pull. See, stablecoins, which includes Tether, gets their name by being a stable asset. Essentially, one stablecoin is pegged to a real asset that gives it its stable value. In the case of Tether dollars, we're talking about $1 US is back to $1 worth of US Treasury asset. But in the future, let's say that Tether, with the US government behind them, decides to devalue. Suddenly, this over here is only worth 50 cents to every $1 of US Treasury asset. That would mean everyone holding stablecoins would have their wealth devalued by 50% overnight. But here's the kicker. Even if you don't touch stablecoins, you would still pay the price.